Deleted Session, December 18, 1974. Rob noted Jane had added freedom of movement in her arms, quite a noticeable improvement, within the space of an hour after supper tonight. They said, "Good evening." Rob said, "Good evening," says. They said, not dictation. Instead, a look at the private, unknown reality as it becomes somewhat visible. It is difficult sometimes to untangle beliefs because you do not get hold of the proper strands. To some degree, Ruber believed that artists and writers, pioneers or revolutionary thinkers were somehow punished, despised even for their genius, ostracized. To some extent, he had the feeling that as long as you kept your mouth shut about what you believed, you were safe, and that idea drew great strength from your own similar belief. Think what you want, but don't make the mistake of telling the rest of the world. Keep your mouth shut. You would paint pictures, then, but not show them. You both possessed such strong creative abilities, however, that once expressed, they were bound to create attention. There are many variations on the same thing that the artist, the revolutionary thinker, the genius would be punished by his fellow men, or even be betrayed by his own abilities. Many such ideas have been held by those relatively innocent of any great creative ideas themselves, in order to rationalize their own deficiencies, in order to feel the opinions of others, however, particularly the opinion of those in authority. You must first, to some extent, respect those in authority, and hold some faith in their ideas. You are taught to respect such authorities, and as mentioned earlier, while Ruber defined authority as a child, he was still dependent upon authority's welfare. Now, he has felt that if the authority, the people, do not like what he says, then they will not buy his books and deny him that welfare. At the same time, he has been determined to go ahead, instead of the people giving him handouts as a child, where he had to be careful of what he did and said. He saw them as contributing to his welfare through buying his books, and if he went too far and offended them, they would stop. Their ideas ruled the world. Their ideas carry the weight of mass acceptance. He has done his thing, but fearfully. Only lately has he realized that he has no respect for any of the authorities, as they call him, or write him, or approach him. As with today's psychologist, he sees that in many ways they know far less than he, and are looking to him for help and direction. These are the people, he suddenly sees, that so frightened him. Give us a moment. Again, you cannot be afraid of the opinions of the world unless you value its opinions above your own. This is a difficult lesson to learn, and many lives live in which the entire question is never encountered. Ruber suddenly realizes that in basic ways he does not respect the opinions of the world. Therefore, those opinions no longer have the power to frighten him. When you are not challenging the world's concepts, there is hardly any problem. Anyone who starts out to do so knows there are some risks. Such people also know, however, that intuitively they possess the ability to conquer any such barriers. Today's physical development represents the beginning of the profound improvement I spoke of. simply surfacing today. None of this ever had to do with Ruber privately, but with Ruber and his contact with the world. None of our sessions, or his own natural development, would ever bother him. The question was how these could be related to the world, how people would interpret or misinterpret, or how he would be regarded, for he took it for granted that anyone offering revolutionary ideas would be punished or ostracized. Until lately, he idealized authority on the one hand and was frightened of it on the other. Only when he realized that there was no authority in those terms could he begin to let down his guard. Now, because of these feelings, he was afraid of setting himself up as a new authority for people to follow blindly. This problem also vanishes when he realizes, as he does, that there literally are no authorities. They are only people. He has been on guard, and only now is realizing that there is nothing to be on guard against. Fear of the spontaneous self is meaningless unless the spontaneous self is set up against the idea of an authority which is not spontaneous. The spontaneous self is feared only because it might break down the authority of a rigid structure. It might be creative. It might come up with something new. It might shatter rigid barriers. Other issues have been contributing to today's suddenly noticeable improvement. Psycho-cybernetics does reach him at a certain point. Edwards has helped, but all of this only because he is ready. He sees that no one else has anything better to offer the world. Each of you felt, however, that there was great value in being anonymous. Yet you put yourself in a position where you could not be. You tell Ruber to keep it a secret from Lena that your rent was raised, or you might move. Good God! While your most intimate personal beliefs and inspirations are given to the world, the idea, however, has been, the more secret you were, each of you, the better off you were, while at the same time your individual and joint creativity would be known. But the habits of secrecy continued, and there is no reason for secrecy but fear. Fear of what? Of people who have the power to hurt you? But I say to you that literally no one has such a power. You can only hurt yourself. When others seem to hurt you, you use them in a way as weapons against yourself, and of course, they so allow themselves to be used for their own reasons. But Ruber has a highly symbolic mind, as well as a highly literal one, so he has hidden behind closed doors. Actually, some of the response to personal reality has helped him considerably, as he sees that so-called authorities are greedy for these ideas and need them desperately. His beliefs, therefore, have been changing. He feels free to move, and that symbolically and literally means a new place. That also applies to you, and both of you jointly, which is even more important, your joint agreement. Now, dear friend, you have also shared some of these ideas, and to some extent, seen Ruber's physical condition as a symbolic statement of how the so-called authorities viewed our joint work. Ruber is striking. In his physical condition, he is still striking. People still notice him. They notice him even more now because of the eccentricity of work. This bothers you. It bothers Ruber. You do not like to be out with him on a certain level now because he is so noticeable, so obvious. It offends your idea of secrecy, privacy, and being anonymous. I do not mean that you are not sympathetic. You follow me? Rob said yes. They said you had each thought, however, that there was something extremely uncomfortable about the truly creative person in society, that he or she had to protect himself or herself. And the symptoms have been Rupert's way of protecting himself, yet also his way of saying, I am different. Do not fear me. Look at me. I am obviously flawed, so you cannot attack me. So he feigns illness. When the opinions of others are no longer so valued, there is no need for such protection, such playing dead. There will be some extraordinary library experiences because of such fears, as I have spoken about this evening. Many people never use their true creative abilities at all, but they do not remain healthy either. They suffer. Their abilities earn for release, and overall their lives are, in your terms, incredibly thin. Rupert can make no new bargain that weighs. Now I change my mind. I will be physically flexible, but I will no longer use my creative abilities in the ways natural to me. That is simply the other side of the same limiting bargain. But that is not where he is going. Give us a moment. He is free to use all his abilities physically, psychically, creatively, and spiritually. One need not be expressed at the expense of another. Instead, each complements the others. When you realize quite literally and practically that you have no other person or authority to fear, then you are free to be yourself, to the best of our ability. Robert's New York Times ad is delightful, but he no longer needs to depend upon that kind of prestige. You are not better than other people, either of you. You certainly are not worse. You are, in your terms, in their reality, while being ahead of them in terms of certain kinds of development. You chose this experience for a reason. You do have equal contemporaries, unknown to you, but you are working at a different level. You are not involved in a specific kind of emotional reality others are pursuing. Those realities are not beneath your own in any way. They do need people like you who are not so involved, who work in other areas to help them. In those terms, you are out of your time. You have been through the same kind of encounters, however, immersed in them like anyone else, so you have no right to feel superior. The implied sense of superiority is what made Rupert so angry at authorities, so defiant. They seemed to have power over him that he resented. You cannot speak to your age, your time, unless you understand it, and you cannot understand it unless at one time or another you feel the weight of its authoritative beliefs. So Rupert grew up where they were important. You did also, though this is not as clear to you. Rupert's experience is specifically more obvious, yet your mother and father each reacted in their own ways to the authority of the world as they understood it. Your mother tried desperately to fit into that framework, and your father as desperately combated it. Rupert need not fear becoming a new authority. People do their own thing and point to others as authorities to take their responsibility for them. He need not fear others as authority, for the same applies. You do not need to protect yourselves against the world. It needs what help it can get, and you can only help it by being yourselves. Robert then is now realizing there is no authority to fear, no need for the defense, and no one he need hide from. The improvement then is just beginning. You will find a house you like. You need to buy, not rent. There are further financial developments, windfalls. Give us a moment. Raise your hand. The house you choose will suit you. The whole affair will be settled now with relative ease, so that you will be quite astonished at the simplicity of it. Further library experiences will help Ruber. Again, do not become impatient. Tell him you choose books rather than television appearances because of your feelings of secrecy and safety. Your house should have a foyer for the same reasons, and some definite stated area between private and public land. This will make a big difference to each of you. You can definitely expect better working shortly. Your participation in class is important because it represents an opening of your secrecy. Ruber felt you wanted him to go ahead, but not go ahead in that regard. Do you follow me? Ra said yes. So he became the figurehead for your joint activities. End of session, or take a break if you prefer. Ra said, we'll take the break. They said, now give us a moment. You are smart to buy a house in the early part of the year. After that, there will be an erratic period, where briefly house prices will rise only to fall again. The house will be an investment, among other things. Your best investment in your time, and any improvements will add to it that you make. Give us a moment. Do not buy a house with a dirt cellar. Do not buy a house heated by oil. The views are not good. A house facing the east is good in your section of the country. Use your psychic abilities to ascertain the house's atmosphere by all means, and no matter how fine it seems. If you do not feel comfortable inside, do not buy it. It should have a fireplace because of the reminders of the hearth. It should not be sided with aluminum or metal. In your area, it should not face the south. Ram noted, but it does. May 1975. They said this also has to do with the ways you use energy. So these are no general precepts for others to follow. Check with your pendulums. Give us a moment. The house and armor can suit your purposes. It has several important aspects that you should look for. The combination of privacy and openness. Do you follow me? Ra said yes. They said houses even in the country can have a closed quality. If the mountains or trees press too closely, the land that you own is important. But the visible land that you do not own is also. And you should be inside of a mountain or some open area, while still having a private, secret area also. Some work will be done on Ruber's guns this evening. I am not telling you what to do. You can safely afford $30,000 with what I know of money that will come in and with plenty to spare. If you cannot accept that statement practically, however, then do not spend that amount. Now, however, the sooner you move, the better, taking your drawings, etc., into consideration. I do not mean tomorrow. Robert is correct. You would not have been happy in your mother's old home, with beliefs and situations as they are, but on your part as well as Robert's. The people who moved there did so for a reason, and they will bring new blood to the neighborhood. The aroma is not good, generally speaking. Briefly on the economy, tides are changing, literally now. The old beliefs are not paying off. You are luckily free of many limiting beliefs that could otherwise hamper you now. Beliefs that once seemed to put you at a financial disadvantage now work for you. You will not fall prey to the perils of success, as many do. There is a house listed, or there was, with a separate apartment. If you can look into that, it may be gone. If you pursue the Elma Heights location, then think of the basement rooms as separate. You need the feeling of a portion of your home open for classes or guests, while a separate portion in private. Otherwise, you will not be content. The book Ruber ordered can be helpful if he ignores some of the suggestions, and you help him with the adjustments that will operate simply as aids. You need clear-cut areas between private and public activity. Encourage Ruber to go out with you more. Each of you cop out in that regard, using time as an excuse. He will, however, feel freer, there is no doubt of it, when he does not think of the hallway as the place where the public world begins. He uses that strictly in line with the beliefs given, but the private area will still help him along the way. I am not excusing the belief. He feels that 45, for him, is a significant age, and so it is. For then he picks up some strands of knowledge that he had, but was not free enough to use earlier. And as I recall, the same occurred to you at that age, Joseph. The important thing, however, is that the body is responding. Your change of environment will be effected again, far more easily than you think, because you have already made the inner changes necessary. The exterior alterations always follow the inner ones. Robert is tired of tending the same old house, so he seeks a new one, meaning that he is tired of the same old beliefs, and ready to move out of them. But both of you together agree, which is of the greatest importance. Literally, you are no longer afraid to move, and that includes many areas. You will benefit by the economic misfortune, but because your ideas are what people need in order to change the conditions that caused the economic's lack of comfort. The economy itself is a reflection of people's concepts, their way of life, and it is not working. Your ideas offer hope and literal promise. The people have brought this upon themselves in their beliefs, and so it is indeed a creative venture. Those who looked entirely to money and position are forced, and will be, to question their beliefs. The troubles with the economy can be the answers to the problems of Western civilization. There are always psychic checks and balances. When people feel they have gone too far in one process, they disrupt it, stop it, look at it. If it is possible, the two of you should have a garden of fresh vegetables, not only for the obvious values, but because of the implied contact with the growing earth, regardless of how small the garden might be. Some of the concepts that will come in the unknown reality will help Ruber understand the nature of healing, for that is highly important. People are healed who come here, in ways not visible. All shrines are basically shrines to the authority of the self, regardless of the personifications or deifications involved. In certain terms, each people is God, and each person is utterly anonymous, for God is completely personal and completely anonymous. That is the end of our session. Ross said, "Okay, thank you, Seth."